Shedeur Sanders wasn't the focal point of the Browns season, but he's become central to a growing concern about fairness in football commentary. When Jason Lloyd praised Dillon Gabriel while dismissing Sanders, eyebrows were raised. But after Lloyd's call to trade Myles Garrett, a generational talent coming off a historic season, the accusations of bias turned into a full-blown media storm.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Sanders, like Garrett, is a high-performing black athlete under scrutiny, while white prospects with thinner resumes get unearned applause. In this light, Garrett's trade talk becomes more than just a bad take. It reflects a trend. A player who logged a 7-sack game and topped every meaningful defensive metric is being pushed out of the conversation for reasons that don't add up. The Browns don't need a rebuild. They need to build around Garrett. Anything else isn't just bad strategy. It's blind to what makes teams successful and athletes legendary. So the Browns finally fire Kevin Stefanski, and the dust hasn't even settled before Jason Lloyd decides to drop a take so scorching it melts logic on contact. His brilliant solution to the Browns' instability? Trade Myles Garrett. Yeah, trade Myles Garrett. The same Myles Garrett who just finished one of the most dominant defensive seasons in NFL history. The one who recorded a historic 7-sack game, something almost no one else in the league has even come close to. The one who led the league in sacks, pressures, and quarterback hits, despite being on a team swirling in dysfunction from top to bottom. You hear a take like that and have to ask, what exactly are we doing here? According to Lloyd, the Browns should use Garrett to stack up draft picks and go find better players. That's the pitch. Get rid of the best edge rusher in the NFL, ranked number 1 by Pro Football Focus, for a shot at someone maybe as good down the line. It's not just risky, it's absurd. And fans didn't hold back, because they weren't just reacting to a bad football opinion, they were reacting to a pattern. This wasn't Lloyd's first time going after elite black players on the Browns roster. Earlier, it was Shedeur Sanders, a young black quarterback prospect with real credentials and college success. Lloyd criticized him while praising less accomplished white quarterbacks like Dillon Gabriel and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, neither of whom have Garrett's pedigree or Shedeur's upside. But somehow, they got the benefit of the doubt. And that's where this stopped being about football strategy and started raising deeper concerns. Because when you consistently go after top-performing black athletes while hyping up white prospects who haven't proven nearly as much, it starts to look less like commentary and more like bias. Garrett didn't just have a great year. He had the year. Historic, dominant, consistent. He was the one bright spot in a team filled with question marks. And yet, Lloyd pushed the idea that he should be traded like some replaceable part. It didn't just fall flat, it exposed something a lot of fans and analysts have been side-eyeing for a while now. There's a disturbing double standard in how players are evaluated in sports media, and this was a textbook example. Garrett didn't just meet expectations, he shattered them. Yet somehow, it still wasn't enough to be considered untouchable in the eyes of Lloyd. And that rebuild logic? It doesn't hold up. Modern NFL teams don't trade away generational talents at their peak in hopes of finding another one. Especially not at premium positions like edge rusher, where dominance is rare and impossible to manufacture. You build around guys like Garrett. You don't send them packing and hope the draft gods bless you with a miracle. What Lloyd was pushing wasn't bold, it was detached. From reality, from data, from common sense. Because nothing about Garrett's performance suggested a decline or a reason to move on. He played through team chaos and still led the league in every stat that matters. 17 games of elite consistency. He was Pro Football Focus's top-ranked edge defender, and his impact showed up in every game. There was no off switch, no coasting. He played like a leader and performed like a superstar. That kind of player doesn't get put on the trade block, unless you're chasing engagement, not solutions. And that's what critics locked in on. The fact that Lloyd's take felt less like objective journalism and more like a manufactured hot take designed to stir the pot. The kind of content that's less about truth and more about traffic. Because there's no way anyone could actually look at Garrett's season and come away thinking, yeah, this is the guy we should get rid of. What made it worse was the tone. Lloyd wasn't tentative. He wasn't asking a question. He advocated for it, forcefully, like he knew something the rest of the football world didn't. But the stats didn't agree. The analysts didn't agree. The fans definitely didn't agree. Because Garrett, by every measurable standard, is the best thing the Browns have going for them. So then the question becomes, if the logic doesn't check out and the performance doesn't support it, what's really driving this? That's when people started connecting the dots. The way Lloyd praised underperforming white players while undercutting high-performing black ones. The way his critiques seemed to focus on personality, leadership, or intangibles when it came to black athletes, but centered on potential and upside when it came to white ones. It was the kind of selective framing that doesn't hold up under scrutiny. And it's not subtle. Because when players like Garrett put up historic numbers and still have to fight for respect, while less accomplished players are being painted as the future, you can't call it fair evaluation anymore. It's bias, whether conscious or not. And that's what people are calling out. Garrett's performance didn't just speak for itself. It screamed. His 7-sack game alone was enough to stamp his name in the history books. But when you lead the league across the board and play through franchise turmoil without losing a step, you're not just good, you're foundational. So when someone like Lloyd calls for trading a foundational piece, it raises eyebrows. Not because trades never happen, but because the why doesn't make any sense. Especially when that logic never seems to apply to certain other players. And this isn't just about Lloyd. It's about what this moment reveals about sports media in general. There's still a tendency to scrutinize black excellence harder, to second-guess it, to frame it as volatile or unsustainable. Meanwhile, mediocrity gets romanticized when it's packaged in a way that fits old-school narratives. That's what this controversy unearthed. And it's why the backlash was so loud. Because this wasn't just a bad take, it was a tone-deaf one. And fans, players, and analysts are paying attention now. They're looking closer. They're pushing back. And they should. Because the game is evolving. And the coverage has to evolve with it. If media voices want to stay relevant, they need to recognize when they're out of touch. And when their narratives are doing more harm than good. Garrett, on the other hand, doesn't need to say anything. His play does all the talking. He's not chasing headlines or clapping back on social media. He's putting up Defensive Player of the Year numbers and staying focused. That's leadership. That's professionalism. And that's the kind of presence teams build around, not ship off. So when a journalist suggests trading that away and can't even back it up with logic or facts, it's not just a misstep, it's a cell phone. Because if your take requires ignoring everything that happened on the field, maybe it's time to rethink your approach to analysis. Myles Garrett isn't just having a moment. He's building a legacy. And this won't derail it. But for Jason Lloyd, this might be one take too far. Because when fans stop trusting your motives, the rest of your work gets viewed through a different lens. And once that credibility slips, it's hard to get it back. If you're tired of seeing elite athletes disrespected after giving everything on the field, hit that like button. Drop a comment and tell us what you think. Was Lloyd just being reckless, or does he actually believe the Browns are better off without Garrett? And don't forget to subscribe, because you already know we're breaking down every meltdown, every bad take, and every media implosion as it happens. This isn't the last one. Not even close. Let's be clear about one thing. This wasn't just a hot take on cold. This was a professional sports journalist calling for the Browns to trade away the one player who gave them a pulse in a chaotic, spiraling season. And not just any player. Myles Garrett, defensive phenom, league leader, the guy who made quarterbacks afraid to get out of bed on Sundays. It's not bold. It's not provocative. It's nonsense. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Stefanski gets fired. And the franchise is already under a microscope. There's tension in the building. Uncertainty. Fans are rattled. The locker room is watching. And Jason Lloyd decides now is the time to float the idea of dumping your most valuable player for draft capital. As if Myles Garrett is a used car. As if this defense, this entire team, would be fine without him. That kind of analysis doesn't come from a place of reason. It comes from a place of sensationalism. You don't make that kind of argument unless you're more focused on sparking a headline than actually understanding how a football roster is built. And fans know it. That's why this blew up the way it did. The outrage wasn't performative, it was earned. Because trading Garrett isn't just a bad move. It's organizational malpractice. There is no smarter version of the Browns without Garrett. You don't move elite players at their peak and pretend it's strategy. Especially not in a league where you spend years hoping to find a pass rusher who can collapse a pocket on command. And still, Lloyd pushed this like it was common sense. This is where it goes deeper than sports. Because when takes start ignoring production, stats, and actual impact on the field, you start asking yourself, what are they really evaluating? Because Garrett didn't falter. He didn't choke in big moments. He didn't have off-field drama. He showed up, played 17 games, wrecked offenses, and kept his head down while the Browns organization spun in circles. He gave you everything. And yet, Lloyd looked at that and decided, expendable. There's something deeply off about that, especially when it's not the first time he's been off in this exact way. Remember, Shedeur Sanders was also a target. Another black athlete, another high-potential prospect. And again, here came Lloyd with a harsh skepticism, picking apart flaws, dismissing upside, talking about development issues. Meanwhile, Dillon Gabriel, less decorated, fewer standout performances, gets framed as a hidden gem. Dorian Thompson-Robinson gets patience and praise. What's the difference? You tell me. This is where the conversation turns from uncomfortable to necessary. Because we're not talking about preference. We're talking about patterns. Patterns that reveal themselves when you see who's getting the benefit of the doubt and who isn't. When the standard of proof keeps moving depending on the player. Let's say the quiet part out loud. There's a history in sports media of scrutinizing black athletes more aggressively than their white counterparts, holding them to higher standards, demanding more consistency, more professionalism, more leadership, while allowing others to skate by with flashes of potential. That's not speculation. That's a well-documented reality. And whether it's conscious or not, it's damaging. Because it sends a message. Even when you dominate, even when you carry your team, you're still on the chopping block. That's what Lloyd's take did. It took one of the most consistent defensive performers in the NFL and said, not enough. And no one bought it. Analysts were baffled. Former players pushed back. The fan base erupted. Because Garrett's game tape speaks louder than any article ever could. His dominance is not theoretical. It's on film every week against the best in the league. He wasn't just playing well. He was disrupting game plans. And what makes it even more insulting is that Garrett wasn't just statistically dominant. He was professionally reliable. There were no headlines about his behavior, no locker room complaints, no me-first attitude. He was locked in, while the team around him unraveled. And that's the guy Lloyd thinks you trade? Let's call it what it is, clout chasing. This wasn't a thoughtful evaluation. This was manufactured controversy. A lightning rod opinion, designed to provoke outrage and drive engagement. That's the playbook. But the problem is, when you keep doing it at the expense of players who've earned respect, people stop listening. You become noise. And that's where Lloyd is headed. Because this wasn't just any player he targeted. It was a generational talent, a face of the franchise leader, a man who's not only stacking stats, but building a Hall of Fame case with every snap. Meanwhile, Lloyd's stacking questionable takes. And when you put those side by side, the contrast is brutal. One man's building a legacy. The other is burning credibility. And yeah, sports media is supposed to debate. That's part of the deal. But there's a difference between debate and delusion, between analysis and agenda. And when your analysis is so consistently skewed in one direction, when it undercuts excellence and rewards mediocrity based on which players you're talking about, it's not just a red flag. It's a mirror. Because it's not just Garrett. We've seen this before. Lamar Jackson's MVP season? Picked apart. Cam Newton's career? Critiqued into the ground. Meanwhile, guys with a fraction of the accolades get tagged as hardworking or smart system fits. It's the same story on loop. Garrett is just the latest to be pulled into it. And the worst part? He shouldn't have to say a word. He shouldn't have to respond. He shouldn't have to defend himself against nonsense when the tape and the numbers do all the talking. But that's the position takes like this put players in. They're forced to justify greatness while their critics get a microphone and a platform. It's backwards. It's exhausting. And fans are tired of it. Garrett has nothing left to prove. He's already done the impossible, stayed elite through Browns chaos, delivered monster performances while surrounded by dysfunction. And somehow, he's still viewed as disposable by certain corners of the media. The Browns don't have a Garrett replacement hiding in the depth chart. There's no heir apparent, no scheme fix. He is the scheme. He's the pressure generator, the double-team magnet, the guy offensive coordinators game plan around. You don't trade that unless you're trying to lose. Which brings us back to the core of this mess. Jason Lloyd looked at greatness, looked at reliability, looked at history being made, and said, maybe we can do better. And that's why this moment isn't just another bad sports opinion. It's a reminder of how easily narratives can turn against players who've done everything right, and how media voices can, intentionally or not, reinforce the idea that certain players are always one mistake or one coaching change away from being expendable. But here's the twist. Garrett will be fine, because greatness doesn't need validation from people who aren't even paying attention to the facts. He'll keep showing up, keep dominating, keep stacking those accolades. Because, at the end of the day, real football people know exactly who he is. But Jason Lloyd? His future in this space might not look so secure, because fans have long memories. And in today's media landscape, credibility is everything. Once it's gone, no take, no matter how spicy, can bring it back. And here's the part that really gets under people's skin. Jason Lloyd wasn't just offering a bad football opinion. He was trying to frame it as the only logical move. He doubled down. He presented it as some kind of forward-thinking strategy, like everyone else was stuck in the past for believing in Myles Garrett's value. But let's be honest, this wasn't cutting-edge analysis. This was a desperate reach dressed up like a master plan. What Lloyd conveniently ignores is that NFL front offices don't operate in a fantasy vacuum. They don't deal away elite defensive players at the height of their careers without a replacement plan or any sense of urgency. That's not how team building works. That's how teams implode. You don't cash out on Myles Garrett unless you're completely unhinged or unless you're just trying to go viral. Which, let's face it, might have been the goal. And that's where this whole thing slides into something even more frustrating. The media obsession with attention at all costs. Say something inflammatory, let it explode, and then ride the wave. Garrett becomes the headline, not for anything he did wrong, but because someone with a platform decided this was the time to start pushing wild narratives. That's not journalism. That's bait. And fans saw through it instantly. You could scroll through the reactions and see how quickly people picked up on the disconnect. Garrett was never the problem. In fact, he was the only thing keeping the Browns' defense from total collapse. He was the pressure engine, the tone setter, the guy who showed up every Sunday with no drama, just dominance. And this is who Jason Lloyd wants to move on from? It says more about Lloyd than it does about Garrett. Because if Garrett's not safe from this kind of speculation, not after leading the league in every major defensive stat, not after recording a 7-sack game, not after holding the team together during a dumpster fire of a season, then who is? What exactly is the standard here? Or more to the point, who gets held to what standard? Because let's not pretend the racial dynamics of this story didn't hit hard for a lot of viewers. This didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened after a clear pattern of Lloyd targeting black players more harshly than their white peers. It happened after his criticism of Shedeur Sanders raised eyebrows, especially when compared to his praise of quarterbacks like Dylan Gabriel and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, neither of whom have done anything remotely close to what Garrett or Sanders have achieved. And at that point, it's no longer just about one take. It's about trust. It's about whether fans believe that the people covering these athletes are giving them a fair shake, or if they're reinforcing narratives rooted in something deeper. And the thing is, we've seen this movie before. Dominant black athletes being asked to do more than their white counterparts to earn the same respect. Being told they're inconsistent even when the stats say otherwise. Being labeled hard to coach or not a leader despite proving themselves time and again. The praise always feels qualified. The criticism? Immediate and unrelenting. Meanwhile, average white players get tagged as gritty or underrated. They're high football IQ guys, even when the production doesn't back it up. And when they mess up, they get 100 excuses. New system. Bad fit. Tough circumstances. But Garrett? He gives you the numbers, the tape, the consistency. And he still gets treated like a piece on the trading block. That's what's really behind the outrage. Because it's not just fans defending their favorite player. It's people reacting to a deeper pattern they've seen over and over. And when someone like Lloyd reinforces that with a smug, contrarian take, without even acknowledging the data, it hits different. It doesn't feel like analysis anymore. It feels like erasure. And Garrett? He doesn't need to say a word. He's already done the talking on the field. 17 games. No letdowns. No off weeks. Just pressure, sacks, and total disruption. He put up a Defensive Player of the Year season, and all he got in return was speculation about whether he's worth keeping. That tells you everything you need to know about the state of sports media. Because somewhere along the way, performance stopped being the only thing that mattered. Now, it's about controlling the narrative. And, unfortunately, when it comes to black athletes, that narrative still gets twisted way too easily. Garrett is the franchise. Full stop. The Browns don't have a rebuild plan better than keeping Myles Garrett. They don't have a draft pick lined up who's going to give them more. The idea that they should hit the reset button on the one thing that's actually working is not only reckless, it's insulting. And the fact that it was pitched as sound logic is exactly why this blew up the way it did. Because you can only gaslight a fan base for so long before people start pushing back. And right now, the people are pushing hard. They're done watching greatness be questioned just because it doesn't fit a certain mold. They're done listening to pundits who treat generational talent like trade bait. They're done pretending like bias doesn't exist in the way athletes are covered. So what happens next? Garrett keeps stacking dominant seasons. He keeps being a model of professionalism. He keeps doing what he's done since he entered the league, being a nightmare for offenses and a blessing for Cleveland. And Jason Lloyd? He's now part of a conversation he probably didn't intend to start. One about media integrity. One about bias. One about what we expect from the people who shape public perception of these athletes. Because this isn't just about Myles Garrett. It's about every player who's been held to an uneven standard. It's about every time greatness got questioned for reasons that had nothing to do with the game. And if Lloyd thought this take was going to cement his status as a thought leader, he miscalculated. Badly. Because there's no clout in being loudly wrong. There's no respect in pushing narratives that crumble under the weight of basic facts. And there's no excuse for treating elite black athletes like they're disposable. Especially when they've earned everything and more. If you've had enough of this kind of media spin, hit that like button. Share the video with someone who still thinks Garrett should be traded, and tell us in the comments, was this just a bad take, or does it point to a bigger issue in how players are evaluated? And don't forget to subscribe. We'll be here breaking down the drama, the meltdowns, and the moments that reveal who's really paying attention, and who's just here to stir the pot.